Hi, everyone. This is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome to StrykerTalks. Few companies in the medical device industry touch the entire spectrum of healthcare like Stryker. From accident scenes to ERs, from ORs to patient rooms, Stryker delivers the supplies, tools, and devices used to provide patients with the highest quality of care. In this podcast, we'll talk with the company's leaders to gain a better understanding of how innovation, new technologies, and teamwork will further Stryker's mission. Let's go. All right, everyone, this is Tom Salemi of DeviceTalks. Welcome back to the StrykerTalks Podcast. Very happy to have Andy Pierce back on the StrykerTalks Podcast. Andy Pierce, of course, is Group President. He leads the MedSurg and Neurotechnology businesses at Stryker. And in our conversation today, we'll hit upon a lot of different points. We'll talk about the acquisition of Vocera and how it's been incorporated in Stryker's MedSurg products, the products that you'll find in hospitals. We'll talk a bit about neurotechnology toward the end of the podcast. And in between, we'll explore where Stryker is with its 1788 platform. It's the visual platform used in endoscopy and other procedures. It's been a hot area of late. And I'll even ask Andy a little surgical robotics question. So enjoy that toward the end. Just a heads up, Andy will be speaking. He'll be a guest of ours at DeviceTalks West, which is happening on October 16th and 17th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. So if you want to hear more from Andy and if you want to meet him in person, make sure you register for DeviceTalks West. Once again, October 16th and 17th will be at the Santa Clara Convention Center, and we will be closing out day one of the conference. Very happy to have him at the conference and actually to meet him in person. We've talked several times. He's been on the podcast before. In fact, we'll include links to his previous appearances on Stryker Talks and the Device Talks weekly podcast so you can get Andy's full story. But again, if you want to meet him in person, join us at Device Talks West. But before we begin this interview with Andy Pierce, I'd like to bring in our fantastic sponsor, S2 Insight, Inc. I am joined by Brad Hedstrom. Brad is a principal at S2 Insight. Brad, tell us about S2 Insight.
So S2 Insight is a product development consultancy, and we help life science and medical device companies improve their product development outcomes. We've been doing this now for 22 years. I've been with the company for 10 years as an employee, but 5 years prior to that, I actually was a customer of S2 Insight at a large life science company. That's
interesting, Brad. And can you help me understand the types of companies that S2 Insight works with, and what's the expertise that S2 Insight brings to these relationships?
So we work with large established multinational companies to late stage startups, and we also work the full spectrum of kind of the regulatory landscape. We work with customers that are doing PMA and 510Ks. We also work with customers that are in early stage research. So we kind of say we have RUO through IVD on the diagnostic side. The med device companies, we've encountered almost every technology you can think of, a lot of neurovascular, neurostimulation, drug delivery products, orthopedic products, mechanical circulatory support products, plasma fractionation. And on the life science side, we've done all kinds of DNA sequencing projects, real-time PCR, mass spectrometry, hematology, immuno and clin chemistry, synbio, cell and gene therapy, electroporation, etc. So there's probably very few technologies that are applicable for life science and med device that we haven't encountered in helping one of our customers get that kind of product to market.
All right, we'll hear more from Brad Hedstrom and S2 Insight a little later in the podcast. If you'd like to find out more right now, go to its website. That's s2insight.com. S as in Salemi, the number 2, insight.com. All right, let's begin this conversation with Andy Pierce, Group President of MedSurg and Neurotechnology at Stryker. Well, Andy Pierce, welcome back to Stryker Talks.
Thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Tom.
We've got a laundry list of things we need an update on, including some news with your LIFEPAK defibrillator. But I wanted to start off when we talked last, which was the fall of 2022. You weren't yet a year in the Vocera acquisition. It's obviously a big acquisition. So now we're 2 years from it being from the closing of that deal. Can you give us a sense as to the integration of Vocera, the inclusion of its technology into your products, and just sort of how things have progressed? First, if you could just remind folks why you acquired Vocera and what Vocera brought to the table.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Tom. We are thrilled with the integration of Vocera. It's been an incredible addition to the company. Customers love it. We've talked about products in the past, like our Neptune product, where you have an emotional reaction from the customer.
We did.
Our customers are emotionally attached to their Vocera devices. It truly does simplify their lives, enhance patient care, increases engagement from the caregiver side, but also from the patient side. So all in, a huge win for us. In fact, I might even come close to calling it a home run for the company. How's it going so far in terms of the commercial activities? The product category continues to grow nicely for us. Again, our customers love it. It is perfectly timed for what our customers need from a company like ours today, in terms of the stress that they're under from a staffing perspective. As we know, as we came through the pandemic, we had a number of nurses move out of the industry, unfortunately, and that really put strain on staffing. And technologies like Vocera, which allow for greater efficiency in patient care, are exactly what our customers need. So it was perfect timing for a company like Stryker that can bring a technology like the Vocera platform to the masses.
Just talk for a moment, though, about I want everyone to understand what Vocera brought. It's a telecommunication sort of platform that I don't know if telecommunications is the right term, but just let us know a little bit more about what
Sure,
it did
yeah.
for Stryker.
Yeah, Vocera, we would classify that as, and this is our terminology that we define for Vocera, as dynamic clinical workflow. And what dynamic clinical workflow allows to happen is it allows, let's take a MedSurg floor or an ICU, doesn't matter, where you have patients in beds and all these alarms and alerts that happen off of devices in the room. It allows for those alarms and alerts to be routed directly to the appropriate caregiver or caregivers so that they know what's going on with their patient or patients at all times. So the devices themselves, whether it's monitoring devices in the room or now our beds and stretchers, are connected through the Vocera platform. We have a platform called Engage, which is allows for the proper routing. It's a smart system. It knows who's on staff. We have rules engines behind Engage that move information from that patient through their monitoring devices or their bed to the right people to make sure that they can provide best care for that patient. We also have a technology that's associated with that platform where if we call it a panic button, where if there's some violent activity, which unfortunately does happen in the healthcare system way too much, the caregiver can push the panic button and you have security staff, et cetera, to help resolve the situation. So it is dynamic clinical workflow is simply a connection of devices routed through technology that gets information to the right caregiver at the right time with the right information so that they can provide best care for that patient. And by the way, the technology is routed through our Vocera system, which is either through the cloud or through an on-prem server to either the caregiver's smartphone or what we call a smart badge, which the caregiver can wear. And that badge can be hands-free. So you can have hands-free communication with other staff members. So if you're on staff and you need somebody else to come help you, or you need some information from somebody else, you can say, hey, Vocera, talk through your badge, connect to that person, get the right information that you need at the right time.
And just remind me, Vocera's technology, it was included in one of your beds, correct? Included in other Stryker products and infrastructure?
Right, exactly. So the key to Vocera is that we have this combination of software connected to devices. And the acquisition allowed us to have a connected device with our bed. So there are alarms and alerts that happen with the bed. So for example, if the patient's needs to be turned or the patient's trying to get out of the bed directly communicates through the Vocera platform to the caregiver. We now have that also for our stretchers. So we have connected stretchers so we can keep staff updated in real time all the time.
That's amazing. Are there plans for Vocera's platform or technologies to be used in other products that are sort of outside the clinical hospital room setting?
Absolutely. We have plans, and we're working with our divisions all across the company to use Vocera as a communication backbone and platform, of course, for all of our connected devices that exist in the operating room, for example, or that exist in the back of the ambulance. We have a lot of technology in the back of the ambulance, a lot of opportunities to really simplify the lives, reduce cognitive burden for the caregivers, and to make sure that the right information is getting to the right person at the right time to provide best care for that patient.
And what do hospitals that don't use your system, don't have your system, how do they communicate with each other? Are they still, I don't mean to laugh, using beepers? Are they using cell phones? What is the alternative to this?
All of the above. They can use cell phones, which are not protected devices from an information perspective and a cybersecurity perspective. So we definitely don't encourage that. Sure. They use nurse call. So that's the button that you think about a patient pushes on their bed to alert a nurse station. And that nurse station has to go find the nurse and say, hey, we need help in room 14. Or the old-fashioned way is still very much in play, and that's yelling down the hallway or walking down the hallway trying to find somebody to care for that patient.
Do you have sort of a before and after story where someone has brought your system into their hospital and the tone, just the feeling of the hospital has changed? Because I'm referencing your earlier point about the stress that caregivers had gone under during the pandemic, after the pandemic, and perhaps maybe even are. I can imagine the yelling and the beeping and the such only adds to that sort of frenzy. Do you have sort of a sense of what happens when Vocera moves in?
We have many, many, many stories before and after. And if you think about the staffing shortages that have been exacerbated, it's not purely as a result of, but exacerbated by the pandemic, you could have a nurse that, say, 5 years ago was caring for 5 patients, and today, because of staffing shortages, might be caring for 10. And if you think about all this alarm fatigue that happens inside of patient rooms, so there's beeps and buzzes happening all the time, that's now happening with 10 patients. You actually can now, through the Vocera system, know exactly which room you need to go to first, who truly is in maybe a state of distress, and prioritize based on the alerts or those rules that we talked about with the Engage platform to make sure that you're going to the right patient, you're moving in priority. So it's not all coming at you at once equally with no priority. You know exactly who to go to first, move to second, et cetera. So you can get greater productivity from fewer caregivers for the same amount of patients. That dramatically reduces stress for the caregivers and allows them to do what they really absolutely intend to do and why they became, say, for example, nurses in the first place, and that's provide A+ patient care.
How has the inclusion of Vocera changed Stryker's portfolio in that? Is it just an add-on to your portfolio? It's kind of and again, I don't want to diminish it, but just sort of a different type of seed or something, but the car is ultimately the same, or is the inclusion of Vocera technology, and we can talk about some of your other products as well, your advanced digital healthcare. Is this are we seeing an evolution of hospital equipment and the medical devices that you're selling that incorporate these technologies? Yeah,
it's first of all, it's the first large platform that is purely software. There's a hardware component. I talked about the badge or the smartphone, but it's really a software backbone that's driving enhanced patient care, greater efficiency. So it's our first major platform, what some might call HCIT or healthcare IT for Stryker. It's really put us in a frame of mind of advancing the way that we think about software and technology to help our customers solve complex problems. The history of Stryker is based on that. It's really having incredible customer intimacy, which allows us to deeply understand challenges that our customers are going through, and then applying our know-how to help our customers solve those problems. Now we have, through software, an open mindset of how modern technology can help us be better partners to solve very complex, real issues for our customers and ultimately, in the end, enhance patient care. So we're looking at all sorts of opportunities, potential add-ons to the Vocera platform, other technologies that exist maybe outside of the Vocera platform as well. But yeah, it's been a tremendous jolt for us to think about how software can help customers solve real-world problems.
I will take a break from this conversation with Andy Pierce to bring back our sponsor, S2 Insight. Once again, I'm here with Brad Hedstrom. Brad's a principal at S2 Insight. Brad, how does S2 Insight work with its customers?
So the first thing we do when, especially working with a new customer, is try to understand what their challenges are. Every company has a unique set of challenges, but there is basically kind of a master list of challenges we run into all the time. And the three most common are, first is that a customer, an organization might be, frequently missing milestones, product development milestones. They're missing their gate reviews. They're missing completion of design freeze, whatever it is. The second most common one is a key program is off the rails. And sometimes this has been pretty dramatic, where finally an organization realizes we have missed this milestone so many times, we know the project's off track. And then the third is, and this is really more for customers we've been working with for a while, and we do have some customers we've been working with for over 15 years. If they're starting a big new initiative, they bring us in to help them kick it off because they know it's going to increase the likelihood they're going to be successful. So for every engagement, we really spend time with the customer to understand what their impediments are and if there's something we can do to help. Our areas of competency are really in project management, systems engineering, and we really bring those two together, focusing on product development. You cannot do just project management without thinking about the product and risk reduction, and that's where the systems engineering comes in. We also do work with customers on helping them improve or put in place a product development or design control process. And also with large organizations, we've worked with some to help them put together a portfolio management and resource management process.
Wow, that's a lot, Brad. How are you able to get that done?
We offer services in two different ways. One is training, and the other one is facilitation, which we call real-time project support. For new customers, we typically start with a real-time project support or facilitation by helping them tackle their biggest program to show immediate improvement. And by immediate improvement, we're talking weeks. Later, if we are successful in helping a customer kind of get things righted again, we might come in later, maybe 6 months later, maybe a year later, and then do some training to help them now institutionalize those best practices. Regardless of the type of engagement, we always do an evaluation. All the participants evaluate our services. And the three most common types of feedback we get, especially for new customers, are, the first one is probably, we should have done this X months ago. So we should have had this workshop 9 months ago. Another one is, we should start doing this for all of our projects. And then the third one is what I call functional empathy, where leading a cross-functional team through a planning workshop helps them understand how their work as individuals impacts other functions and other people. And that one, I think, is, for me, is always the most rewarding to see, where you may have an organization or a team that's got some contention between, let's say, R&D and operations, or product management and R&D. Going through this process together, they realize, now I understand why manufacturing is always so angry about us throwing stuff over the wall. So they really learn how their work impacts others, and together they can just put together a much better and effective project plan.
Well, that's really interesting, Brad. And do you have a case study that can help illustrate how S2 Insight works with your clients?
Sure. A large vertical who had acquired a med device from a small startup, but they didn't acquire the startup. They'd acquired the product the startup was developing. And that startup had used a development partner. So there were 3 business entities or 3 companies involved, which made it kind of complicated execution. Also, there was some lack of trust between the 3 organizations. So our client brought us in. Part of it, we've worked with him many years in the past, but also we were a third party, a neutral third party. Our role is to help the team to build the best plan possible, regardless of who's working for what company. We ran a 3-day planning workshop. We were able to have all the participants identify what they and their representative organizations were delivering and what they weren't delivering. So there was a fully integrated schedule that was developed so that our customer, the acquiring company, could see what it was going to take to actually insource this product. And that actually executed successfully as well.
Well, that's super helpful. We'll have a link to the case studies in the show notes, but of course you can go to s2insight.com for more information. Thanks again to S2 Insight for sponsoring this episode of Stryker Talks, and for Brad Hedstrom, a principal there, for joining us on the Stryker Talks podcast. Again, go to s2insight.com for more information. Now let's get back into this conversation with Andy Pierce of Stryker. I was looking at your advanced digital portfolio on your website, and I see the iBed wireless. Is this new? Is this a hospital bed with its own Wi-Fi signal? What is that?
Our wireless platform is relatively new for us, primarily attached to our newest MedSurg bed, MedSurg/ICU bed, Procuity, which allows for wireless communication as opposed to plugged into the wall, routing through the hospital system, wireless communication through the Vocera platform of alarms and alerts from the patient bed directly to the caregiver.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's move on to some news. You had this a few weeks ago. You released the LIFEPAK 35 monitor defibrillator. Talk about the device and its significance.
We are extremely excited about the LIFEPAK 35. It's the next generation monitor defibrillator, which is what we would call our workhorse or professional monitor defibrillator. How does that vary from one that isn't? That's the AED that you might see hanging on the wall at your office, Tom, or at your gym or at a hotel. Those are more consumer-based devices. This is your commercial device that's going to primarily sit in the back of an ambulance or inside of a hospital.
That's interesting. And those will be primarily used in ambulances and in hospitals, or where are those sold at?
They are sold both in the hospital and what we call our pre-hospital market, which is primarily in the back of the ambulance. But if you think about the volume of product that's sold, it is in the back of that ambulance.
Okay. Well, let's stay in the hospital and get into the OR a bit and talk about the 1788 platform. You released a new camera, I believe, last year that had some increased functionality. But let's bring us up to date on your 1788 tower and all the accompanying systems.
1788 was launched in the fall of last year. And yes, it's our latest edition of our MIS camera. And we have a leadership position in that space. We've had it for a long time. We are the lead innovators. We're very proud of that in MIS visualization, and this takes it to the next level. So if you think about what brings value in MIS visualization, it's clarity of the image. But what we've been working under since 1588 is taking it beyond that white light image, which is just what you and I could see on a television screen, for example, and moving it to what we call advanced imaging modalities, primarily using lasers to ignite fluorophores that attach themselves to certain types of tissue and allow you to clearly see a specific portion of anatomy that you're trying to see. The advancement, we call it the drug that's used is indocyanine green, or we call it ICG for short. ICG is injected into that patient, a laser is ignited via the camera, and the system reads where that ICG is. Historically, that's been for observing perfusion or blood flow. So we can see where you have a blockage or where you may have a leak, and we can make sure that that patient is fully taken care of before you close them up and move on, for example. The advancement that comes with 1788 in terms of advanced imaging is we have emerging fluorophores or drugs that are being designed to adhere to very specific types of tissue, like nerves, for example, the ureters, if you're in urology. And what's especially promising and frankly inspiring about 1788 is we're working with a drug called Cytolux, which attaches itself to cancer cells, and in this case, specifically lung cancer. So you can inject the patient with Cytolux and see the lesions, and you'll know if it's malignant or it's non-malignant based on if it attaches to the lesion. If it attaches, it's malignant, and the thoracic surgeon or the lung surgeon can actually see with the camera the complete tumor itself or the lesion, and resect that lesion. And it's not just a cloudy version that's mixed in with all the other tissue. It lights up, and they can see the margins and make sure that they're, quote unquote, getting all of the cancer.
Is 1788 2D, and are there plans for 3D? I was at a conference recently, and 3D seems to be in favor, or at least it's rising. There's a lot more headsets that I used to see at these meetings. What are your plans there?
Tom, we've had we've had many years of developing these systems, and we've had a lot of time to assess 3D and whether or not 3D was the right thing for what customers actually want. And when you actually look at the adoption of 3D for MIS visualization, you see this more in robotics where you're using 3D, but in MIS visualization, you actually have very low adoption of 3D. And a big reason for that is the image quality with 4K and what will be 8K and further on in the future is getting so good that the image actually more or less looks like it's in 3 dimensions. So you can see a lot more tissue than, say, 2 or 3 generations of video camera before. And it really allows that, whatever that is, that anatomy that the surgeon is interested in, to pop. So we're not opposed to 3D. We have, of course, incredibly competent design engineers and competencies that we have technically in the organization. We're monitoring it closely, but thus far, from an adoption perspective, as we've moved advanced imaging further along and that enhanced white light image, that's been more attractive to the vast majority of our customers.
Interesting. You mentioned robotics. How do you feel about your position in the space regarding your tower? There's been a release of a new system that has a tower that people are talking about, and we saw an acquisition by another supplier of a tower of a surgical robotics business. It just seems like there's noise all around you. I wonder how you're viewing that activity around you and how it might influence what you do internally.
Sure. First thing I would say is we're in the healthcare business, so healthcare and technologies that enhance healthcare, we're excited about. And we love what surgical robotics has done. There is an absolute place in the market. There always will be. And in certain applications, you are absolutely providing better patient care through surgical robotics. So we're excited about surgical robotics. Of course, we have one on the heart tissue side in orthopedics. We sort of like that product as well. Mako's pretty exceptional.
It does okay.
On the tower perspective, we have a number of competitors. We've had them for years. We're not the only show in town. And what we like to believe is that as long as we're focused on technologies that matter, that raise those standards of patient care and bring unique elements to the surgical suite, that will continue to be in demand. And there will always be a place for MIS surgery. And we just want to be the leader in that space and make sure that customers are attracted to our technologies. And if you look at our results over the last few years, and we exist right alongside those surgical robots, our results are, I would say they speak for themselves, that we can coexist in that world very, very, very effectively.
And what do you tell people who you bump into at conferences who say, Andy, when are you going to buy a surgical robotic system?
That never happens, Tom. Nobody ever asks us that.
Never? Oh, that's so weird.
It might have already happened 3 or 4 times this week, but it happens a lot. And again, we're very excited, and that is an incredible space that in many ways is advancing healthcare. And we high five our friends that are making those technologies better every day. There are well over 100 surgical robots in development all around the world that are for soft tissue. And we have a team here that spends an extraordinary amount of time going deep into those robots. We have a clinical team with key opinion leaders that we engage as well to test drive, if you will, those robots and give us feedback. And we are monitoring very closely technologies that would fit us, that provide a niche opportunity in the space that is good for our company and good for healthcare, that fills a void. Mm-hmm. And when the time is right, when we find that right solution, we're certainly excited to get into that game. But again, we're not in a hurry. That would be more of an offensive move on our part. We are excited about our towers and our technology that we bring in MIS today.
Great. And final area, I just want to talk neurovascular, which is ironically one of the areas that surgical robotics seems to be moving into. But we can stop dancing to that tune and just focus on what you have on the neurovascular side yourselves. Any news or portfolio adds or enhancements that we should know about?
Sure. We're always advancing our platform, both in hemorrhagic stroke and what we call AIS, or acute ischemic stroke, which are the clots. And we have new technologies in large bore catheters that are coming down the pipe. We have new technologies in coated stents that allow for antiplatelet-like activity, so you don't have clotting on flow-diverting stents. We have new technologies in our coils, in our catheters, wire catheters for placing coils, placing the stents themselves. So yeah, we're on offense in that space. We love the stroke space simply because it applies so well to our mission to help make healthcare better and have that positive impact on patients all around the world. But we have an incredible team of engineers and marketing professionals that exist inside our neurovascular business, and they have a beautiful pipeline of technologies that cover all of those spaces that I mentioned.
Well, it's always great to catch up with you, Andy Pierce. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks for everything that you do for our industry. We appreciate you.
Well, that is a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the StrykerTalks Podcast. Thanks again to S2 Insight Inc. for sponsoring this episode. Thanks to Andy Pierce for making himself available. And thanks, of course, to you for being part of our StrykerTalks experience. Once again, if you want to meet Andy in person and hear from him directly, he'll be a keynote at DeviceTalks West. That, once again, is happening October 16th and 17th at the Santa Clara Convention Center. It'll be the closing keynote on day one, so make sure you do not miss that. Go to west.devicetalks.com for more information. Please do us a favor and subscribe to the DeviceTalks Podcast Network so you don't miss a future episode of Stryker Talks or our other great podcasts. And finally, if you wouldn't mind, please share this episode on social media. When you do, link to me, connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd love to be part of those MedTech conversations. All right, folks, thanks again for being part of the Stryker Talks podcast. We've got more great MedTech podcasts coming your way.